already know, our topic is the worker in communist Czechoslovakia, and our research basically just covered the health, happiness, and general lives of the workers. Also, as you can see by our poster over here in the corner, we focused some on the portrayal of the workers.
Okay, so as you can tell from the poster, it shows the portrayal of the worker, but also the reality of the worker. If you look to the top right, you'll see a uranium miner from Czechoslovakia. Uranium at the time was very important because after World War II, uranium deposits such as Yakimov was found in Czechoslovakia and was the only known uranium deposits in Europe at the time. This was important for the Soviet Union as they wanted to finish the arms race. They wanted to not just be in the war, they wanted to win. So they ended up getting in contact with Czechoslovakia. They, by 1945, they actually gained control of the uranium deposits, and they started enforcing their policies, which were very ineffective, and I will discuss later in the presentation. As you can see right here, this is Yakimov, and it shows the blue shown is different labor camps. For uranium deposits, there were a lot of political prisoners in them. It was very common. They were inexperienced, usually went in while they were still in custody, so they weren't really informed. There was a lack of safety management systems, specifically ventilation systems. They couldn't, this was crucial since they couldn't filter the radiation from the mines, which caused a lot of health respiratory issues within the miners. Actually, a discovery is found of a fungi in the mines, and it actually absorbed pure uranium, and then the radioactivity passed on as spores, which were inhaled by the miners, and it was that radiation was discovered in their saliva and in their urine, and it stays in their lungs for life, which shows the detrimentalness of the health. Klett said, often only the outer layers are considered, and thus we fail to use all of the information for which we pay the high price of an accident. This is demonstrated for cement in Czechoslovakia, the cement and explosives plant, because it exploded, and there wasn't a really good initial analysis, but a final analysis showed that they had a decay in safety management systems. A lot of health effects. Yes? Oh, sorry.
I'm sorry, I'm just groaning.
The government knew how bad the health effects were from the mines. Northern Bohemia was actually known as the tumor of Europe, whereas also miners were given money, bonuses that were called funeral money. The life expectancy of the uranium miner was 48 years, but specifically, health effects consisted of cancers such as leukemia, respiratory tract cancers, thyroid, intestines, a lot of tumors and mutations such as the baby down here, and NTD, which is neural tube disorders. That talks about like spina bifida up here and anencephaly, where they just don't, they're missing part of their brain. They don't have really a head. You can see he's growing another, like an attachment to his head. This is important for Czechoslovakia. The Soviet Union had the Soviet Union's ideal was quantity versus quality, and this became a part of Czechoslovakia as the Soviet Union gained control of Czechoslovakia. This is shown in Chernobyl, which everyone probably knows. 1986, there was a nuclear meltdown. There was a power output surge, and they tried shutting it down, but then a more extreme output surge occurred that created an explosion. This is shown right here, and this actually shows a nearby town where everyone had to evacuate. And this image shows the areas affected by the radiation, so you get an idea of how far the radiation actually expanded. A huge health factor of this was that Chernobyl cleanup workers, their risk doubled for getting leukemia, which, like I mentioned earlier, is a huge issue with radiation. Russian nuclear power plants are known for being poorly built. They have a lot of maintenance failures. They have faulty equipment. They're really unorganized, which was Chernobyl's issue, along with just most of their nuclear power plants. So if you imagine them taking over Czechoslovakia and enforcing their policies in the uranium mines, you can understand that there wasn't really a safety management system in place. I'm going to show you the U.S. uranium mines, describe them, and then I'm going to compare them to Czechoslovakia's. The U.S. was the sole purchaser from 1948 to 1971, which was really important since the uranium mines were mostly discovered in the southwestern region of the U.S., and which meant that the Navajo people were some of the main workers there. They considered it a source of income. They were also inexperienced. They were ignorant as to what radiation was, so the government was more than willing to have them work. The U.S. is different though, because as many of you probably know, the 70s we became more aware of the impact we have on the environment. So a lot of environmental acts and laws were taking place. In 1990, actually, the Radiation Exposure Compensation Act was enforced, which meant that anyone who worked in the mines were compensated for their health issues. Since over the years, they just kept not taking care of it, and they finally said, we have to do something about this. And so the difference between Czechoslovakia and the U.S. is that the U.S. focused more on safety policies, and Czechoslovakia couldn't, since the Soviet Union had taken over. And this demonstrates the correlation between their policies and when the Soviet Union took place.
Okay, so Tiffany discussed this idea of quantity. Obviously, the government faced a little bit of a problem. How are we going to inspire our workers to produce what we need them to produce and keep them working at their maximum potential? Well, one of the ways that they did this was through different kinds of media, film, literature, music, and what I'm going to be focusing on is propaganda pieces of artwork and as well as film in my portion of the presentation. During my part, I'm going to talk to you about the history of Prague and its effects on the film movement, the history and definition of socialist realism, and its effect on government propaganda strategies.